I spent my life as the reliable, invisible son, cleaning up my brother's messes. When they discovered my secret $28 million fortune, they didn't see my success. They saw a solution to his failures and demanded I pay up. This is how I finally chose myself. The first thing that hits you when you walk into my workshop isn't the sight, but the smell. It's a holy trinity of scents. The sharp, clean tang of cold steel, the rich, earthy perfume of old leather, and the faint, sweet bite of high-octane gasoline. To me, it's the smell of sanity. It's the smell of a world that makes sense, a world where every piece has a purpose and every problem has a solution, even if you have to fabricate it yourself. My workshop, a sprawling, converted warehouse in a nondescript industrial park outside Chicago, is my sanctuary. Everything in it, from the climate-controlled clean room where I rebuild engines to the rows of antique tools polished to a mirror shine, is a testament to order. An order I fought like hell to create. I was running a hand over the cool, sweeping fender of a 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, a car so beautiful it could make a grown man weep, when my phone buzzed. My client, a tech billionaire from Palo Alto, was on the other end. Caleb, his voice was tinny through the speakerphone. My guy on the ground in Maranello says the chassis number looks right, but he's got a weird feeling about the tooling marks on the engine block. I leaned closer, my eyes tracing the invisible lines of the car. Tell your guy to check the weld patterns on the exhaust manifold hangers, near the firewall. The Scaglietti factory had a guy in '62, name of Enzo's Ghost for all we know, who had a specific, slightly messy brazing technique. If those welds look too clean, too perfect, it's a high-end replica block. If they look like they were done by a master craftsman in a hurry, then you've got your car. A pause on the other end. That's why I pay you, Caleb. Nobody else knows that. I ended the call with a quiet satisfaction. This was my world. A world of provenance and patina, of finding the hidden truth beneath layers of paint and time. I had built my company, Precision Provenance, from nothing. We were the ghosts of the high-end vintage car world, the silent authenticators who made sure billionaires weren't buying multi-million-dollar fakes. The name was intentionally discreet. My clients valued that. So did I. The main bay door rumbled open, and Anna walked in, silhouetted for a moment against the pale November sky. She was carrying a bag that smelled of fresh bread and roasted coffee, a scent that somehow managed to complement the workshop's own perfume. Anna, an architect whose mind was as sharp and elegant as the building she designed, was the one part of my life that felt as orderly and true as my workshop. Thought the master of Silent Empire might need some fuel, she said, her smile warming the cavernous space. She placed the bag on my workbench, careful to avoid a set of restored Barani wire wheels. Silent Empire? I chuckled, taking a sip of the coffee she handed me. She looked at me, her gaze both loving and impossibly perceptive. You're closing a deal on a car that costs more than the GDP of a small island nation. Yet your family thinks you're a grease monkey who tinkers with old cars. That's an empire, and it's definitely silent. She paused, her expression softening. They called again, didn't they? I didn't have to ask who they were. I just nodded, my jaw tightening. Let me guess. Leo's new app needs another infusion of cash, and Mom's a wreck because of the stress. They had to take out a second mortgage on the house, I said, the words tasting like ash, to fund his final push to profitability, the same one he needed 6 months ago. Anna sighed, her hand finding mine. And you're going to fix it, aren't you? You're going to play the good son at Thanksgiving, pretend everything is fine, and probably slip them some money on the side. She squeezed my hand. Caleb, I have to ask, who are you really protecting by pretending to be this small-time mechanic? Them? Or yourself? Yourself from what you know, they'll do the second they find out the truth. Her question hung in the air, more piercing than any client's doubt. I didn't have an answer for her, because I knew she was right. My secrecy wasn't just about privacy. It had become a shield, a comfortable, heavy shield I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. My phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID was Mom. I felt a familiar, weary resignation settle over me. I answered, Caleb, honey, Thank God. I'm just so stressed. I don't know what to do. Her voice was a high-pitched quaver of practiced anxiety. With the house, and your father's blood pressure, and Leo working himself to the bone, I just can't even think about cooking a Thanksgiving dinner for 20 people. I looked at Anna. She gave me a small, sad shake of her head, already knowing what I was going to do. Don't worry about it, Mom. I heard myself say, the words of the responsible older son coming out on autopilot. I'll handle it. I'll get the whole thing catered. Oh, honey, no, we can't afford that. You know that. The protest was part of the dance, designed to make my gesture seem even more sacrificial. It's fine. I got a little bonus at the shop. My treat, I lied. Don't worry about a thing. Just relax. We hung up, and I stood there in the quiet of my sanctuary, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of steel and history. I felt the familiar weight of my family's chaos settling on my shoulders. I was their mechanic, after all, the one they called when things broke down. And as always, I had just agreed to fix it. Anna's question echoed in my mind long after she'd gone back to her studio. Who are you protecting? The truth was the role of Caleb, the reliable one, was a prison of my own making, a cell I'd started building when I was just a boy. The memory that surfaced was sharp and vivid, smelling of cut grass and leaking oil. I was 10 years old. The family lawnmower, a rusty old beast from Sears, had sputtered its last. My dad, a man whose patience with mechanical things was non-existent, had kicked it, cursed it, and declared it dead. For him, the problem was over. For me, it was a challenge. I spent the entire weekend in the garage. My small hands, armed with my dad's wrenches, which were too big for me, were covered in grease. I took the carburetor apart piece by piece, cleaned the jets with a pin from my mom's sewing kit, and put it all back together using a diagram I'd found in the library. On Sunday afternoon, I pulled the cord. It coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life with a cloud of blue smoke. My dad came out to the porch, a can of beer in his hand. He stared at the running mower, then at me, a skinny, grease-stained kid. He walked over, and for a single, perfect moment, he put his hand on my head and ruffled my hair. "Good job, son," he said, a rare note of genuine pride in his voice. "You've got the touch." That was it. That was the moment. A fleeting touch, a handful of words. It was the most potent drug I had ever known, and I became an addict on the spot. I spent the rest of my life chasing that feeling, that brief, shining moment of paternal approval. I became the fixer. I learned to repair the leaky faucet, the rattling screen door, the family car. I learned that my value was in my utility. The high never lasted, though, and the come down was brutal. Another memory pushed the lawnmower aside. I was 17, a senior in high school. My robotics team had made it to the state championships. I had designed and built our robot's grappling arm, a complex piece of engineering I had poured hundreds of hours into. The competition was on a Saturday. On Friday night, the phone rang. It was Leo, my younger brother by 3 years, his voice a frantic whisper. He'd borrow my dad's car to impress some girl, try to street race a Mustang, and wrap the car around a telephone pole. He was unhurt but terrified. I didn't even hesitate. I spent all night at a police station in a neighboring suburb, then at a tow yard, signing papers and making calls. I got home just as the sun was rising. I missed the competition. My team took third without me. When my parents got home, my dad surveyed the wrecked car in the driveway. He listened to Leo's tearful, dramatic apology. Then he put an arm around my brother's shoulders. "Well, son," he said with a world-weary sigh, "I guess you learned a valuable lesson about responsibility." He turned to me, his face blank. "Thanks for handling that," he said, before leading Leo inside for a lecture that would end with a hug. There was no mention of my competition, no apology for my lost opportunity. My sacrifice was just expected. It was my function. I was the reliable one. That was the pattern. Leo was the project, the one who needed guidance and investment and second chances. I was the foundation, the infrastructure. You don't praise the foundation. You just expect it to hold everything up. Thanksgiving Day arrived, cloaked in a sky the color of dishwater. The first act of my performance was to swap my daily driver, a sleek, dark gray Audi RS6, for what I call my pilgrimage truck. It was a 15-year-old Ford F-150, meticulously maintained but visibly aged. It was reliable, unassuming, and completely unbelievable as the vehicle of a man worth 8 figures. It was the perfect camouflage. I pulled into my parents' driveway in the quiet suburban neighborhood where I grew up. The house looked smaller than I remembered, weighed down by the second mortgage I knew was hanging over it. I could feel the familiar tension in my shoulders as I walked to the door, a manufactured smile on my face. The house was already filled with the low hum of family, aunts, uncles, cousins. The air smelled of my mom's potpourri and a faint, underlying scent of financial anxiety. "Caleb." My mom enveloped me in a hug that felt both desperate and theatrical. "Thank you, honey. You're a lifesaver." An hour later, the real saviors arrived. A white, unmarked van pulled up, and 2 professionally dressed staff from the Epicurean Table, a high-end catering firm I use for corporate events, began unloading thermal containers and chafing dishes. The effect was instantaneous. A hush fell over the living room. My Uncle Robert whistled low. "Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Carol," he said to my mom. "Who'd you call for this, the Four Seasons?" My mom laughed, a brittle sound. "Oh, it's just a little place Caleb knows. You got a nice Thanksgiving bonus at the garage, didn't you, honey?" I just nodded, feeling a dozen pairs of eyes on me. "They owe me a few favors." I mumbled. Leo, holding court on the sofa, smirked. "Splurging, are we, big brother? Finally fixing up a car worth more than a decade's worth of rust." I ignored him, as the caterers set up a spread that would have made a food blogger weep. A perfectly roasted turkey, maple-glazed Brussels sprouts with pancetta, truffle-infused mashed potatoes, artisanal bread. I felt a grim satisfaction. It was a passive-aggressive masterpiece. As everyone gathered around the extended dining table, my phone buzzed with a notification from my auction app. The online auction for the 1937 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic, one of only 2 in existence, was entering its final hour. My client in Dubai had authorized me to go up to $30 million. The current bid was $24. The pressure was immense. I tried to focus on the family chatter, the mundane talk of weather and ailments, but my mind was on the auction. Leo was telling a grand, embellished story about a venture capital meeting he'd had. So I said to them, "Look, you're not just investing in an app. You're investing in a paradigm shift in human-to-human connectivity," he said, gesturing with a bread roll. My father watched him, his face glowing with vicarious pride. My mother nodded along, beaming. I felt a familiar vibration in my pocket. Without thinking, I slipped my hand inside, and my fingers found it, a small, antique, perfectly balanced flathead screwdriver from a 1920s toolkit. It was my tell, a habit I developed years ago. When the pressure built, when the anger I wasn't allowed to show started to churn, I would take it out and polish the smooth, worn steel with my thumb. It was a small act of imposing order on a chaotic world. I started polishing, the rhythmic motion a silent rebellion under the table. The dinner was, by all accounts, a roaring success. The food was so undeniably good that it silenced even the most cynical of my relatives. For a while, the conversation flowed easily. But eventually, as it always did, the gravitational pull of my brother's life took over, and the family became the captive court of King Leo. "The key is the user interface," Leo explained, leaning back his chair as if he were in a boardroom and not my dad's slightly threadbare dining chair. "It's about creating a frictionless experience. We're not just building a product, we're cultivating an ecosystem." He used words like synergy and scalability with the casual confidence of someone who had learned them from a TED Talk 5 minutes earlier. My parents were mesmerized. "Oh, Leo, it just sounds so brilliant," my mother said, clasping her hands together. "All that hard work is finally paying off. You feel things so deeply. That's why your ideas are so powerful." I saw it for what it was. She wasn't just praising him. She was praising herself. His constant need, his dramatic failures, and soaring ambitions gave her a purpose that my quiet, self-sufficient success never could. I was a solved problem. He was a lifelong project. My father chimed in, his voice thick with pride. "It takes guts to risk it all like you do, son. To put yourself out there. Not everyone's built for that." He glanced at me, for a fraction of a second, and the subtext was as clear as if he'd shouted it. Not like your brother, who plays it safe in his little garage. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. He was praising Leo for the very recklessness that had forced them to mortgage the house, while simultaneously demeaning the quiet, relentless work that was, unbeknownst to him, keeping their finances afloat. My phone buzzed again. The bid on the Bugatti was at $26.5 million. A new bidder from Japan had entered the fray. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Caleb, honey," my mom said, turning to me with a look of patronizing concern. "You're so quiet. Are you eating enough? You look thin. We worry about you, with the economy being what it is for small businesses." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "Business is steady." "Steady is good," my dad conceded, as if granting me a small favor. "Nothing wrong with an honest day's work. Your grandfather was a mechanic, a good, honest man." He said it like he was eulogizing me, lovingly placing me in a box of respectable, blue-collar obscurity. And his words came back to me. Who are you protecting? I was protecting this fragile, intricate illusion they had all built. An illusion where Leo was the brilliant, misunderstood visionary on the cusp of greatness, and I was the simple, reliable, but ultimately unambitious son. The good-hearted grease monkey. My role in this family play was to be the stable, slightly disappointing backdrop against which Leo's drama could unfold. I existed to make them feel better about the choices they'd made, the son they had enabled. The auction notification popped up again. Bid at $27 million. My client's limit was getting closer. The pressure in the room and the pressure on my screen were creating a strange, dissonant harmony in my head. Leo, emboldened by the attention, turned to me. "Hey, seriously, Caleb, when this app takes off, I'll cut you in on the series of funding. For a discount. It's the least I can do. Maybe you can finally trade that old truck in for something made in this century." He winked at the rest of the family, who chuckled appreciatively. It was a joke at my expense, but framed as an act of generosity. It was Leo's genius. I just gripped the little screwdriver in my pocket, my thumb rubbing the cool steel until it was warm. "Excuse me for a minute," I said, pushing my chair back. "Just need to check on something." The lie was thin, but no one questioned it. They were too engrossed in Leo's next monologue about disrupting the social media landscape. I walked back to my old bedroom, which had been preserved like a museum exhibit of my teenage years, complete with faded posters of cars I now owned. Leo's room, by contrast, had been redecorated 3 times. I sat on the edge of my bed, the springs groaning in protest. I pulled out my laptop, a sleek, powerful machine that was another piece of my hidden life, and logged into the secure auction portal. The screen was a flurry of activity. Current bid, $28,500,000, bidder 713, JP, time remaining, 1 minute and 45 seconds. My client in Dubai was bidder 242. My hands felt slick. This was the moment. I had to be ready to counterbid in the final seconds. I opened another window, logging into my company's primary financial dashboard. It was a habit, a need to see all the moving parts at once. The screen lit up with the cool, professional interface of our banking software. It displayed the numbers that represented a decade of sleepless nights, relentless work, and an obsession with perfection. The bedroom door creaked open without a knock. Some things never change. "Hey, I need to borrow your charger," Leo said, walking in. He stopped when he saw me on the laptop. A slow, condescending grin spread across his face. "Ooh, what we got here? Bidding on some hubcaps on eBay? Let's see what the big shot mechanic is up to on Thanksgiving." Before I could react, he did what he'd been doing his whole life. He took what he wanted. He snatched the laptop from my hands. It was a playful, brotherly gesture on the surface, but underneath, it was an assertion of dominance, a need to belittle my world. "Leo, don't," I said, my voice low and sharp. But he was already walking back toward the dining room, holding the laptop like a trophy. "All right, everyone, time to see what kind of high-stakes business Caleb is doing on the holiday," he announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I followed him, my blood turning to ice. I felt like I was moving in slow motion. Watching a car crash, I was powerless to stop. He spun around in the doorway of the dining room, triumphantly turning the screen for everyone to see. He expected them to see a grainy picture of a car part, a bid for $50. He expected them to chuckle along with him and my quaint little hobby. But that's not what they saw. The room, which had been buzzing with conversation, fell utterly and completely silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock I'd bought for my parents last Christmas, which my mother had thanked me for, assuming it was a nice replica. On the bright, 15-inch screen, illuminated for all to see, was not eBay. It was a secure banking portal, and on it in stark, undeniable black and white were the numbers. Precision Provenance LLC, financial dashboard. Net liquid assets, $28,750,432.19. Pending client escrow, Bugatti, 37SC, $4,500,000. Q3 company profit, net $6,215,000. I watched Leo's face. It was a rapid, fascinating slideshow of emotions. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. His brow furrowed as he reread the numbers, his brain refusing to process them. Then, a wave of nauseous shock washed over him, draining the color from his face, leaving behind a pasty, sickly pallor. His trademark smirk dissolved into a slack-jawed gape. He actually swayed on his feet. I looked around the table. My Aunt Carol's fork had stopped halfway to her mouth, hovering in midair. Uncle Robert, who had been laughing at one of Leo's jokes, looked like he'd been slapped. My dad was squinting, his brain trying to reconcile the image on the screen with the son he thought he knew. And my mother, she just stared, her face a perfect frozen mask of astonishment. Then, a low whisper escaped Leo's lips, a sound so quiet it was almost lost in the suffocating silence. No, that can't be right. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, thick and heavy and suffocating. It was finally broken by a sound that was so out of place it was grotesque. My mother started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a high, hysterical giggle that bordered on a shriek. "Oh, Leo, don't be silly," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "That's just one of those fake internet things. Caleb works at the garage. Tell him, Caleb." All eyes turned to me. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. I stood there, in the doorway, the architect of this disaster. I took a slow breath, the air feeling thick in my lungs. The time for hiding was over. The shield was gone. "It's real, Mom," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the chaos churning inside me. "I don't work at a garage. I own the company, one of the largest vintage automobile authentication firms in the country." My dad choked on his wine. A cousin started coughing violently. The hysterical giggle died in my mother's throat, and her face began a terrifying transformation. It went from pale to red to a deep, mottled purple. The veins in her neck stood out. She shot to her feet so fast that her chair screeched backward and toppled over with a crash. "You!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. Her voice was raw with accusation. "You had all this money, and you let us struggle? You let us mortgage our home." There it was. Not, "Congratulations, son." Not, "Wow, Caleb, we're so proud of you." Not even, "How did you do it?" Just pure, unadulterated outrage that her personal ATM had been holding out on her. Struggle. The word came out of me, cold and sharp. "I've been sending you $5,000 a month, every month for the last 3 years. While sitting on millions?" she screamed back. "Your brother has student loans. He has dreams. He needed that money. So that was the crime. My success wasn't my own. It was a family resource that I had selfishly hoarded. It was a fund that should have been used to prop up my brother's failures." Leo, snapping out of his shock, found his voice. And as always, his go-to emotion was victimhood. His eyes filled with tears, a performance he had perfected since childhood. "I don't understand," he sobbed, his voice cracking. "How could you lie to us? To me? We're family. I trusted you." My dad finally found his footing, rising to his full height, his face a mask of righteous fury. "He's your brother. We raise you to help your family, to lift each other up. What kind of man are you, to be so selfish. And that's when something inside me, something that had been coiled tight for 30 years, finally snapped. The quiet, reliable foundation cracked, and decades of repressed anger, hurt, and invisibility came pouring out. I took a step into the room. The chaos seemed to slow down, the frantic energy focusing on me. I felt a strange, chilling calm descend. The years of swallowing my words, of biting my tongue, of accepting the narrative they had written for me, it was all over. I reached into my pocket and took out the small, antique screwdriver. I didn't polish it. I walked to the dining table, past my stunned relatives, and placed it deliberately on the polished wood surface. It made a soft, definitive click, a full stop. I looked at my father. "Raise me?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You want to talk about how you raised me? You raised me to be invisible. You raised me to be convenient." I turned to my mother, whose face was still contorted with rage. "You shipped me off to Grandma's house every time I had the sniffles because you were afraid I'd infect your precious, fragile Rachel. Oh, wait, that was the other family story, wasn't it? My story is that you shipped me off to handle every mess Leo made, to be the responsible one, so you didn't have to be. Where were you when I won the state robotics competition? Oh, that's right. You were at Leo's first and only gig with his band that broke up a week later." My gaze swept the room, then landed back on my parents. "You missed every awards ceremony, every parent-teacher conference where they told you I was gifted, every single milestone. Why? Because Leo might feel left out. Leo might need you. Leo crashed your car, and I missed my shot at a national title to clean up his mess. And who got the lecture about learning a valuable lesson? Not me." I pointed a finger at my dad. "You never saved a single penny for my college education. Not one. But you co-signed every loan for Leo's private school tuition for the 3 different majors he dropped out of. You just took out a second mortgage to fund a fantasy app that will never exist. And now you have the audacity to be angry that I built something for myself, with no help from you." I turned to my mother again. "Struggle? Let's talk about struggle. The $5,000 a month you thought was a gift from your old friend, Aunt Carol, that was me. It started 3 years ago when Uncle Gene told me you were about to lose this house. The $20,000 for your knee surgery last year, Mom, the one your insurance wouldn't fully cover, that was also me. But you never asked, did you? You never once questioned it. It was easier to believe in the kindness of distant friends than to imagine your boring, reliable son could ever be that successful." The room was utterly silent now, the shock replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding. Finally, I looked at Leo. He was staring at me, his fake tears gone, replaced by a look of pure, cornered fury. "And you," I said, my voice dropping even lower, "you're the worst of all, because you knew, didn't you? You knew about the money. You knew it was coming from me, and you let them believe it was someone else. You let them praise you for your struggle while you cashed the checks I was sending to keep a roof over your head. Also, you could keep playing the part of the tortured artist, the misunderstood genius. I let the accusation hang in the air. The silence was my vindication. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. I looked around at their faces, these people I called family. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt empty. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place at this table, and now I realized it was the last place on earth I wanted to be. I picked up the screwdriver, its cool steel a familiar comfort in my hand, and slid it back in my pocket. "I'm done," I said, not to any one of them, but to the room, to the years of history. "I'm done fixing things." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. I walked with a deliberate calmness that felt alien and liberating. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, the keys to my truck feeling heavy and real in my hand. Behind me, the chaos erupted again, a confusing blend of my mother's wailing, my father's bellows of ingrate, and Leo starting a new, frantic line of reasoning about family obligation. I didn't look back. I closed the front door softly behind me, shutting out the noise. The cold November air was a relief, a clean shock to my system. As I walked to my truck, my phone began to vibrate violently in my pocket. It didn't stop. A cascade of notifications, a digital assault. I got in the truck, started the engine, and just sat there for a moment in the quiet suburban street, the engine's low rumble the only sound. I didn't drive home. I didn't know where home was anymore. So I drove to the only place that felt like a sanctuary. I drove to Anna's. She must have seen the look on my face when she opened the door, because she didn't say a word. No, I told you so, no questions. She just opened her arms, and I walked into them. She held me right there in her doorway, and for the first time in my adult life, I let myself break. I didn't sob, but a deep, shuddering tremor ran through me, the release of 30 years of tension, of holding it all in. She just held me tighter, her presence a solid, unshakable anchor in the storm. Later, sitting on her sofa, a glass of whiskey she'd poured for me untouched on the table. My phone lay face up, still buzzing with a relentless rhythm. Texts, missed calls, group chat notifications. A digital siege. Then a call came through from a number I recognized, but rarely saw. Uncle Gene, my dad's younger brother. I hesitated, then answered, bracing for another wave of condemnation. Caleb. His voice was quiet, raspy. It's Gene. Uncle Gene, I said, my own voice hoarse. Look, kid, I'm not calling for money, or to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. He paused, and I heard him take a deep breath. I'm calling to say, I'm sorry. I saw it. For years. We all saw it. You were the foundation, and Leo was the cracked mural they just kept repainting, pretending the cracks added character. Tears pricked my eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of a profound, shocking relief. Your dad, Gene continued, he had dreams once. Big ones. They didn't pan out. I think in Leo, he sees a second chance for himself. And in you, he sees the steady life he ran away from, and it scares him. It's not an excuse. It's just the sad, damn truth of it. I just wanted you to know you're not crazy. And I'm proud of you, son, for what it's worth. He hung up, leaving me in stunned silence. One voice, one person in that whole family who saw the truth. It wasn't a solution, but it was a light. It was the external validation I had stopped chasing from my parents, arriving unexpectedly from a quiet corner of my life. It was enough. It was everything. Anna reached over and gently took my hand. The foundation is what a good house is built on, she said softly. The mural is just for show. I looked at her, then at the still buzzing phone. For the first time, I felt a flicker of power. The power to not answer. The days following Thanksgiving were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The initial barrage of frantic, angry calls morphed into a more calculated, multi-pronged assault. My mother took the path of emotional manipulation. She left long, rambling voicemails, her voice thick with tears. I just don't know who you are anymore, Caleb, after all we did for you. I lie awake at night, wondering where I went wrong as a mother. Your father's heart can't take this kind of stress. Each message was a carefully crafted guilt bomb. My father, on the other hand, resorted to terse, wounding text messages. They were missives on duty, honor, and betrayal. A man's first duty is to his blood. You have forgotten that. Your grandfather would be ashamed. Success has made you cruel. But Leo went public. He launched a full-scale smear campaign on Facebook. He wrote a long, tragically worded post about his secret millionaire brother, who had been hoarding wealth while watching his family suffer. He painted himself as the devoted son, working his fingers to the bone, only to be betrayed by the brother he'd always looked up to. He was brilliant at it. He wove a narrative of such convincing victimhood that the comments section exploded with support for him. Distant cousins I hadn't seen in a decade weighed in, calling me heartless. Old high school acquaintances suddenly had very strong opinions on my moral character. Leo, of course, replied to every comment, fanning the flames. Thank you for your support during this difficult time. It's just so shocking. Family should come first. I showed the post to Anna. She read it, her expression hardening. He's not just trying to hurt you, Caleb, she said. This is a public trial. He's trying to build a case that you owe them to pressure you into giving in. She was right, and the proof arrived a week later. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope delivered by certified mail. My hands were steady as I opened it. It was from a law firm, Garcia, Prentice and how. The letter was formal, filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear. It was a letter of intent. My parents, represented by Mr. Garcia, were exploring their legal options, including a potential lawsuit for filial responsibility and ongoing financial support. They cited my father's health, their financial distress, and the severe emotional damages caused by my deceit and subsequent abandonment. It was absurd. It was a ridiculous, long-shot legal threat, but was also very real. They had taken it to the next level. This was no longer just a family drama playing out over pot roast and text messages. This was a siege. They were trying to burn my life down until I gave them what they wanted. I sat there, holding the letter, the heavy paper feeling like a declaration of war. My own family was threatening to sue me for the crime of being successful. The lawyer's letter was the final straw. It was the move that transformed the situation from a painful family rift into a hostile negotiation. And in a negotiation, you don't operate from a place of emotion. You operate from a place of strategy. I didn't call my parents. I didn't engage with Leo's online circus. I called my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Catherine Shaw who had handled my company's contract for years. Then, I drove to the one place where I always found clarity. My workshop. I spent an hour just walking through the space, running my hands over the cool metal of finished projects. I wasn't thinking, I was absorbing the order, the logic of the place. This was real. This was what I had built, not the chaos and entitlement of my family. That evening, I sat down with Anna. "They've declared war," I said, sliding the lawyer's letter across the table. "So I'm going to end it, not with a battle, but with a treaty." She read the letter, her lips tightening into a thin line. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about what they really want," I said. "They don't want me. They don't want a relationship. They want the money. They want their problems to go away. They're holding my peace of mind hostage, so I'm going to buy it back." The next day, I met with Catherine. I laid it all out. "They're bluffing," she said, after reading the letter. "A filial support case like this would be nearly impossible to win, especially since you can prove you've already given them substantial support. We can fight this and crush them." "I don't want to crush them, Catherine," I said. "I just want them out of my life. I want to pay a one-time fee for a lifetime of silence. I want to sever the connection so cleanly that there are no frayed ends left for them to tug on." She looked at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. "A final settlement." "Exactly," I said. We spent the next hour drafting the terms. It was a delicate calculation. The amount had to be large enough to be tempting, to make them abandon their fantasies of millions and accept the sure thing. But it couldn't be so large that it felt like a victory for them. It had to be, in essence, fix-it money, not a fantasy life fund. This is what we decided. A certified check for $250,000 for my parents. Enough to pay off their new mortgage and any outstanding debts, with a comfortable cushion left over. And a separate check for $50,000 for Leo. Enough for him to clear his own debts and maybe, just maybe, get a real start if he chose to. But the money came with a price. The funds would only be released upon the signing of a legally binding, ironclad, non-disclosure, and no-contact agreement. They would be forbidden from ever contacting me or Anna again, directly or indirectly. They would be forbidden from speaking about me or my finances publicly, including on social media. Any violation would result in severe financial penalties. It was a clean cut, a business transaction. I was buying my freedom. Catherine sent the offer to their lawyer, Mr. Garcia. Then we waited. For 3 days, there was nothing. I found myself checking my phone constantly, a nervous energy thrumming just beneath my skin. I imagined the arguments, the outrage, the drama unfolding in my parents' living room. I pictured Leo screaming that it was an insult, my mother weeping at my cruelty, my father pontificating about my lack of honor. On the 4th day, Catherine called. "It's done," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "What happened?" I asked, my own voice tight. "Exactly what you predicted," she said. "Garcia told me they threw a fit. They called the offer insulting, a pittance. They blustered, they threatened to see you in court. Garcia, who is smart enough to know their case was garbage, Advise them that a guaranteed $300,000 is substantially better than a 0% chance of winning millions and ending up with massive legal bills. She paused. Their greed won, Caleb. They argued for 2 days. But in the end, they wanted the money more than they wanted the fight. They're coming in tomorrow morning to sign the papers. The funds will be transferred from escrow the moment I have the signed documents in my hand. And just like that, it was over. Not with a bang, but with the scratch of a pen on a legal document. That night, my phone buzzed one last time with a number I recognized. It was Leo. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then accepted the text, my curiosity getting the better of me. It was a final, pathetic volley of poison. I hope you're happy. You bought your way out of having a family. You're a heartless bastard, and you're going to die alone with your stupid cars. I never want to see you again. I read the message. A year ago, it would have gutted me. A week ago, it would have made my blood boil. But now, it just felt hollow. The words of a stranger. I thought of the small boy I used to protect, the brother I once loved, and I felt a pang of genuine loss. Not for the man he had become, but for the boy he never got the chance to be. Then, with a strange sense of ceremony, I opened my contacts. I found his name. I pressed block. I did the same for my mother and for my father. One by one, I erased them. The silence that followed the final tap was absolute. It was the sound of a caged door swinging open. The sound of peace. 6 months later, the sound that filled my world wasn't silence, but the glorious, throaty roar of a 2.9-liter V8 engine, echoing off the stone walls of the Amalfi Coast. I was behind the wheel of a vintage 1967 Alfa Romeo 33 Straydale, a car so rare and beautiful it was basically a myth. The sun was warm on my face, the Mediterranean a dazzling, impossible blue to my right. In the passenger seat, Anna was laughing, her hair whipping around her face in the wind. You know, for a guy who spent his life being invisible, you picked a ridiculously conspicuous car, she shouted over the engine song. I'm making up for lost time, I shouted back, grinning as I expertly downshifted into a hairpin turn. I was teaching her how to double clutch, how to feel the rhythm of the machine. She was a natural. We had won the Bugatti auction. The deal had cemented my company's reputation as the undisputed leader in the field. But that victory felt distant now, secondary to this. The feeling of the wheel in my hands, the open road ahead, and Anna beside me. This felt real. We pulled over a scenic lookout, the cliff dropping dramatically to the sparkling sea below. We got out, leaning against the warm metal of the car, looking out at the horizon. Do you ever? She started, then hesitated. Do you miss them? I thought about it for a moment. Honestly, I thought about the house I grew up in, about the smell of my mom's cooking, about the ghost of that 10-year-old boy still chasing his father's approval. No, I said, and the truth of the word surprised me with its simplicity. I don't miss them. I miss the idea of them. I'm more in the family I wished I had, not the one I actually got. I looked at the Alfa Romeo, its perfect lines a testament to human passion and precision. A thought that had been forming for months finally clicked into place. You know, I said, turning to Anna, all those years, I thought my job was to find the hidden value in things others had discarded, to take a rusted, forgotten wreck and see the masterpiece underneath. I spent so long trying to do that with my family, trying to restore something that was fundamentally broken, trying to polish away the rust, hoping to find that one perfect piece of original machinery underneath. I took her hand, its warmth chasing away the last of the phantom chill. I was wrong, I said. It was never about them. The whole time, the most important restoration project wasn't a car in my workshop. I smiled, a real, unburdened smile that reached my eyes. It was me. She smiled back, her eyes shining. She leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that tasted of salt and sunshine and new beginnings. We stood there for a long time, watching the sun dip lower, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and gold. The road ahead was winding and unknown, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was free, and I was driving.